Hello, this is Jessica Fox from Florida Virtual Bookkeeper, and I am recording this video today at the request of several of my colleagues. This is a time where a lot of people are having to unexpectedly switch to working from home, working remotely, due to the threat of the coronavirus. This is happening at the same time that schools are being canceled, daycares are being closed, and we're suddenly faced with having to work from home while our children are also at home. I hope that some of my tips will be helpful to you. I am recording this from the perspective of somebody that has been working at home with her children for about 9 years. I have 2 boys, and I have been working from home since they were both infants. So your mileage may vary. There's a lot of things that will depend on the age of your children, their temperament, your parenting style, if they have special needs. I will tell you that the beginning will probably be rough. And hopefully these tips will give you some tools, some coping mechanisms, some things to adapt. The most important thing that you will need is patience and flexibility. Especially if you have young children, don't expect that you'll be able to just sit down and work 9 to 5 like you were used to in the office, at least not at first. But depending on how long the situation progresses, both you and your children can find a routine that works for you. You will need to do some trial and error and experimentation to see what works best for you. When I had an infant, what really saved my sanity with trying to get work done is baby wearing. If you do not know what this is using a baby carrier where the baby is attached to your body. There's lots of different types of carriers. Some are better than others. Some people will like some more than others. And the type of carrier will vary depending on the age of the baby. A newborn will need a different type of carrier than a child that's 12 months old will. But this allowed me to soothe an infant while still getting work done. If you do not have a standing desk, using something like a kitchen counter or a high table can be very helpful, because if you have a fuzzy baby, you could be standing, working on your computer, doing reconciliations, checking email, whatever you need to do, while at the same time, your baby is attached to you and is soothed. And the reason why I say standing is because a fuzzy baby, if you haven't noticed, when you pick them up, you tend to have a little mommy bounce, and you're able to do that movement. So I was really good when I had an infant, especially a newborn, to do a lot of work while doing the mommy bounce. If you do not have a carrier, they are found in many stores. Box stores like Target carry them. There's lots of choices on Amazon. There will be some trial and error required. If this is not an option for you or something that you'd rather not try, then you will need to have some more flexibility in your schedule. You may need to work while baby is sleeping. I've done that before. It's a little distracting and it can be annoying if baby decides to cut naps short, but it can be done. You could also get used to working one-handed while having a baby in another arm or sitting on your lap. Been there, done that. While all of these things may not be very effective for a full day, you can rotate and cycle throughout them to at least get some productivity in your day. One of the things that you want to keep in mind is that you cannot have the same expectation of productivity that you would in the office while your children are at school or at daycare. You need to come to the realization that there will be distractions, your attention will be divided, and any productivity that you get done needs to be celebrated. Focus on how much you're getting done, not how many times you're getting interrupted. Now, once your child is a toddler, it can get a little bit tricky. They don't want to be carried for so long. They want to explore, usually get into trouble, sometimes test the boundaries. So that's when I became really good at working in microbursts of productivity. I think that was what got me started on my journey of productivity and efficiency, because you can only get them entertained and into something for so long. So I knew that I had 10 to 15 minutes to get this done, and I just had to get it done, because after that, my house could be destroyed or they could be climbing up on something. You know how children are. What I found helpful is to avoid using screens as a babysitter. If you are the type of parent that has no issues with screen time, more power to you. This is probably going to be very easy, because you can just put on a movie, Paw Patrol, or any of those shows, and your toddler will be mesmerized for pretty long periods of time where you can get a lot done. I was not that generous with screen time, so I had to get a little bit more creative. I learned to develop lots of different types of activities that I could rotate and keep fresh. There's lots of videos on YouTube and blogs and Pinterest tutorials, and there's so many resources of activities that you can create for your toddler. My toddlers used to be very fond of sensory activities. There's lots of sensory bins that could be created with household items. You do not need to go to a toy store and buy overpriced items unless you want to. My kids were happy with me dumping a bag of rice in a bin and then making an epic mess with it. That got me a decent amount of time of productivity. And then we will make a game of cleaning it all up afterwards. One of the things that can be tricky when you have toddlers is when you're having meetings or phone calls, and suddenly your toddler wants your undivided attention, or they decide that that's the best time to throw a tantrum. Sometimes we cannot avoid that, but there are some things that can be done to reduce the risk of that becoming a norm. With my toddlers, I learned very early on to talk to them like adults. They were very intelligent and very rational, and they very quickly learned cause and effect. So they learned early on that if mom requested that they be quiet until she got off the phone, they will get a certain reward or special treat afterwards. And that reward could be something as simple as they get to pick the color of their cereal bowl the next day. You don't have to bribe your kids. Just make them part of the process. This was very effective for me starting from about 15 months old. So don't feel like your child is too young for you to try. At first, you may get confusion, you may get resistance, but they pick up very quickly. What I found the most effective when I needed to have peace and quiet for a meeting was to have a set of toys or books or activities that were not available at any other time. I had a special basket with cool things that were new to them and were exciting, and they knew that the only time they could play with it was when I was in a video meeting or on a phone call, and they could only play with it for as long as they behaved. By having a variety of resources and materials and stimuli that you can rotate keeps everything fresh so that they don't get bored from having to entertain themselves with the same things over and over. Now, as they get older, it starts to get a little bit easier. By the time you have preschoolers, usually it gets better. Of course, it will depend on the temperament of your child, but I found that the older they got, the better it was. And in my particular case, I found that the longer I did it, the more that they learned this is part of the routine now. So yes, the first few days may be rough, but as soon as it feels like a routine, they'll settle into one too. One of the important things that you want to keep in mind when you are having to work and take care of your children simultaneously, that this is working under the assumption that the other parent is also working or not present, and that you do not have a nanny or a helper present to help you, is that you will need to have lots of flexibility. I know I said this earlier, but I need to say this again. You need to remain flexible. Now, the other very important thing is that you want to adapt to your child's schedule rather than making them adapt to yours. You do not want to be swimming against the current because it will be a lot harder. Go with the flow. You will usually know your child's temperament. You'll know what time of day they tend to be the most energetic and happy, and you know what time of day they're the more cranky. So there's no point in you trying to schedule a meeting during a time when you know that they're gonna be cranky. So what if you're having a meeting and suddenly there's a child screaming in the background or throwing a tantrum wanting your attention? The person on the other side of the webcam can probably relate if they're a parent. We are all going through the same thing right now. It's new to a lot of people. Nobody's gonna think less of you. If anything, many people will be impressed by you, by being able to juggle parenting and working at the same time. So don't be so hard on yourself. I know that it's a little overwhelming, but it can be done. Once your child is elementary school age, it gets a lot easier because they listen more, they can be a little bit more relied upon. They don't usually necessarily, depending on the child, need as much direct supervision, and you can probably get some work done at the same time. Children love to be involved and they love helping. My 7-year-old loves it when he can watch me have meetings or attend webinars. He loves it when he feels helpful. So if you have lots of paper, let them feel like they're working. Give them a stack of papers to organize. It doesn't matter if they don't do it right. They are being quiet, entertained, and letting you get things done. Once they get older than that, you can even make them into your assistants. My 9-year-old helps me with my business on a very frequent basis. He's learning accounting. I wouldn't be surprised if I can hire him in a few years. I imagine that if you have teenagers, you probably don't need to be watching this video. Most of them tend to keep to themselves, be easily entertained. As long as there's food and some electronic gadget, they are good to go. But if they're restless, if they're bored, if they're not used to being stuck at home with you, definitely get them engaged. One of two things will happen. They'll love it, you'll bond, they'll pick up some new skills, or they'll hate it and they'll leave you alone so that you don't bother them with it. Either way, it's a win-win. So hopefully this information is helpful and you have picked up some useful tips. Like I said, I am not an expert on the topic other than I've been doing it for a few years, so I'm sharing what has worked for me. So the key, and I'll reiterate, is remain flexible, lower your expectations. Expect the first few days to be rough, but it will get better. And as your children settle into a routine, they will learn to understand when it is and it's not okay to interrupt you. My children are so very well trained that when I say I am going on a meeting, I don't need to remind them. They already know that the only reason to interrupt will be for a fire or blood emergency. Unless it's a fire or somebody's bleeding, it can wait. Now, granted, don't expect this to work for you overnight. On the first few days, I will advise you that every single time that you need the time to focus on a meeting or a phone call, that you explain what you need, what's at stake, and if needed, what's in it for them. Because we are very reward-driven. So if you play quietly for now, maybe you will get to watch an extra 10 minutes of TV. Whatever reward works for your child. It doesn't have to be something negative. It could be you can spend an extra 5 minutes playing outside if the weather is nice enough for it. Whatever it is, think creative, think outside the box, check out resources online. There's lots of material from work-from-home moms and stay-at-home moms that have written blogs and posted pictures of all of the cool things that have worked for them. And I imagine over the next week or so, as more and more people are in this situation, a lot more content will be available. So I hope that this is helpful. If you have any suggestions or any comments, feel free to share them. I would love to hear them. My email is jessica@floridavirtualbookkeeper.com.